Welcome to Sparks of History, where Jewish history and world history meet. We are very pleased and honored to have with us today Rabbi Dr. Kenneth Brander. Rabbi Brander received his rabbinic ordination smicha from the Rabbi Isaac Elchanan Theological Seminary at Yeshiva University and holds a PhD in general philosophy and comparative literature from Florida Atlantic University. Currently, Rabbi Brander is president and Rosh Hashiva of the Or Torah Stone Network of 32 educational institutions, leadership development initiatives, outreach endeavors, women's empowerment programs, and social action projects. Previously to Or Torah Stone Network, Rabbi Brander served as vice president for university and community life, as well as the inaugural David Mitzner Dean of the Center for the Jewish Future at Yeshiva University. And previous to Yeshiva University, Rabbi Brander served as the senior rabbi of the Boca Raton Synagogue before Boca became Boca from 1991 to 2005, overseeing the explosive growth from 60 families to more than 600 families. Rabbi Brander, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Getting started, obviously, since October 7th in Torah, it's been a extremely difficult period for the Jewish people here in Israel and abroad as well. What kind of questions, legal, halachic questions, are you being asked during the current war, whether it's related to Shabbat, to marital issues, fertility issues, aguna questions? What's coming across your plate and how are you handling those?
Well, that's an excellent question. And I think its response really depends at the different times, sequences of when the questions were asked. If I would answer what are the major questions that are that I'm thinking about and considering dealing with right now, they're different than they were 3 months ago and different than they were even 6 months ago. So I'll start, with what I'm dealing with now and then move a little bit backwards till October 7th or so. I think the biggest questions that anyone who has students in the IDF, and we, Or Torah Stone, as you mentioned, we have 32 institutions, so we have around 5,000 students. At one point, between faculty, which there were 150 that were in Gaza, the Hesder Yeshivot, the Kohalim, and the women who were serving in the intelligence units, as well as alumni, if you added all of those groups together, we had around 5,000 students, staff, Kolo guys in the IDF. Right now, I think it's down to 1,000. The biggest issues that I think any one of us are dealing with, whether you're the Rosh Hashiva at Or Torah Stone or the Rosh Hashiva in fill-in-the-blank institution, is the mental health issues. Because our students and faculty haven't gone in, once or twice. Some are in for the third time. And the impact of, in a course of 8 months or so, going into Gaza or up north, which in some ways actually right now is more challenging than Gaza, has not only impacts on the Gavra, on the individual who is in that particular location, but also on their families. You have families where fathers have not been home for more than, a scattered month in the period of 9 months. And that has impact on a whole bunch of different aspects, which I'm sure that you and anyone listening to this fully understand. My major concern and preoccupation is to make sure that both the parents, namely, let's say the soldier, his spouse, or her spouse, or cases of, we have one, for example, student, she is responsible in the Pikuda Oref that deals with the civil needs of all the different groups that explain the crises to the various populations. So she has from Bells to Bedouins and all the groups in between. Yesterday, she received a certificate for graduating from our training program to go on shlichut. It's the first, she covers her hair fully. It's the first time that I have seen her not in uniform yesterday. Um, and the point is that how do you make sure that the families are whole? How do you make sure that they're dealing with the issues? You know, your husband comes home and he dumps his, very dirty knapsack in the middle of the living room. You're happy that he's come home with all limbs intact, but yet you ask yourself, well, I've been cleaning this house alone with four kids underfoot. And all of a sudden, my husband comes home and dumps his dirty knapsack and all his dirty other stuff in the middle of the living room. And my biggest concern, and I think it has a halachic component to it also, is how are we dealing with the mental health issues? How are we making sure that the children are whole, that the couples are whole, that the faculty is whole? You're dealing with faculties, you're dealing with mechanchim and mechanchot that have lost 9, 10, 11 students. There's a Hebrew word for a mishpacha that has lost a loved one to a terrorist attack or to a an attack or to in battle. They're called the mishpacha shkula. We've always talked about mishpachot shkulot. And I think for the first time you have mechanchim shkulim, mechanchot shkulot. They're with their students in 11th and 12th grade. They go off, they learn in yeshiva, then they come back, or they're hesder, Rosh Yeshivos or Ramim, and all of a sudden they're losing students, ones that they were Masada Kedusha underneath their chuppah, underneath the chuppah, and all of a sudden they have to deal with the chalitza issues. So chalitza issues, if you would have asked me this question a few months ago, those were new to me that we were dealing with those. Now we've gotten a little bit past that. There's not yet any aguna issues, Baruch Hashem. We know everyone that has fallen, and even those who are hostage, we know to the best of our knowledge which ones have fallen and which ones have not. So we don't have aguna issues, but chalitza issues, we worked with the Rabbanut to write appropriate letters to the young widows. And these are people that, women who got married maybe a year ago or 2 years ago max, and all of a sudden they're agunas. Excuse me, all of a sudden they need chalitza. So there have been the mental health questions really right now are the ones that I'm really grappling with. The issues dealing with aguna, thank God we haven't had to deal with yet. Chalitza, making sure the women are treated properly in the chalitza thing. How are we doing it? Making sure that they're friends, what the definition of friends are, whether it includes family, not includes family, depends on each chalitza case. And we're doing whatever we can, and we're training also what's called the katsinot nigaim. Every time someone loses a loved one in the army, they get an officer who's responsible to take care of them. They're not always, first of all, they're not all from, and even the ones who are religious may not be familiar with the paradigm of chalitza. It's not something that happens on a regular basis. So those were the issues that we were dealing with. You have the issues of posthumous paternity, where, certain soldiers had frozen sperm prior to, especially those what's called sadir that were in the regular army. They froze sperm. Tragically, they fell. Either their spouses want to have a child in their memory, and I think this is a much more challenging situation, or a parent wishes to find a surrogate to have a child to remember, almost like a comfort child. There are multiple halachic issues, questions. They've all been discussed. In addition to the smicha that you were so kind to mention, I had the privilege of learning with Rav Menachem Burstein and Yibado Ben Chaim L'Chaim with Rav Mordechai Eliyahu Zatzal in Eretz Yisrael, and received smicha from them in issues of fertility and halacha. So there are all of these questions about how to deal with posthumous paternity. Is there a relationship between the sperm donor and the child? If the father was a Kohen, he fell in war, and now his sperm is being used. Is there a relationship? So there have been those issues. And I think the earliest issues, when the army was getting their act together, but it wasn't fully together, with Shabbos issues. You get a phone call, I'm finishing what I need to do, and it's now 10 o'clock in the morning. I can stay on base or I can go home and see my family. Can I go home and see my family? And all of those types of questions. Or I have 5 hours off at Shabbos. I haven't seen my family for 2 weeks, but I know I'm going to have to come back, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and Shabbos is over at 6. Can I go home? Those were the questions we were getting, not just me, we were all getting those questions, and there was a consensus of how to deal with them. So initially, I think it was for lack of a better term, the Leffel Teffel questions like Shabbos. I think it's moved to issues of like fertility, and dealing with issues of chalitza. And I think the biggest question that challenges us right now, in addition to questions that I have nothing to deal with, including identity of those who have fallen, which is a whole different set of questions, again, that I'm not really familiar with. I have one student who is part of that group, but I don't really have any engagement with that. It has been the mental health issues. Those will be, in my opinion, the most significant questions we're receiving.
How many fertility issues have you seen? I mean, is this, are they isolated cases, or are they're just coming up one after another?
Yeah, I don't know that any of us can answer that question because everything is happening so fast right now. We're in the middle of this. So I've dealt with like 3 or 4. If everybody has dealt with the same amount, you're talking about, or some people have dealt with, you could be talking about 40 or 50 of them, or maybe more. Um, I can't really answer that because again, it really depends. And it may add one other halakhic question as you're jarring my memory, is in the beginning, there wasn't enough equipment for everybody. So for example, I got a phone call from a group of soldiers up north. Harav, we need 20 armored vests, ephodei karami, ceramic vests. We have 10. But we have the vest for another 10, but we don't have the ceramic pieces. The front and the back pieces are the same. Are we allowed to take out the back pieces of our vests, give it so that there's another 10 vests, so everybody has the front pieces? Front pieces is for enemy, to protect against enemy fire. The back pieces are protect, God forbid, from friendly fire. So could we basically put ourselves in quasi danger in order to circumvent the fact that there will be other people that won't be who are in totally at risk at this point in time? The heroism that you saw from people willing to put themselves in quasi danger in order to protect their friends, or the fact we would deliver vests and someone would say, no, I'm in a Hummer, which is not protected, and he is walking, so therefore I won't take the vest until he has the vest. Not only the heroism, but the halachic issues. Can someone put themselves in quasi danger to save someone else or to help someone else who's in vaday sakana, indefinite danger? There's a machlokas between the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud, and the Aruch HaShulchan speaks about it. I told them that there are 2 answers to the question. One is, give them the ceramic vest, and it's my job to make sure that you all, as students of mine, that you all have both parts of the vest, and those questions shouldn't need to be asked.
There's been a discussion as to how we define in halachic and Jewish law terms this war. Is it a mandatory war, a mechemet mitzvah, etc.? There's been a lot of discussion about this, how you define it, and what the ramifications of that might be. Are you seeing issues where the Army, Tzahal, the IDF has its rules and regulations of engagement, which of course the soldiers have to adhere to, and are you seeing any conflict between that and what the halacha might mandate in terms of self-defense, action in battle? Are those issues that are coming up?
That's an excellent question. I'm not sure I can fully answer it, but to take the first piece of this, I think it would be hard pressed not to consider this a Mechemes mitzvah. Clearly, the Rambam in Hilchos Melachim, when he discusses the laws of kings and wars, when he discusses it, clearly states that while there are some wars that are not considered obligatory wars, but a war in which the Jewish people are in danger, the state of Israel is in danger, when there is an enemy that wishes to destroy us from the river to the sea, and we've learned to take them literally, that it's a Mechemes mitzvah, it's an obligatory war, that even a chatan and kala, a bride and groom from underneath their marriage canopy, need to engage and to serve in war. And including not only the Rambam, but multiple commentaries from all sides of the spectrum, whether it's the Grizz, or whether it's the Tzitz Eliezer, or whether it's Rev Yashiv, the Meiri and others, the Rav Ovadia Yosef, have all agreed that in cases in which there aren't enough soldiers, in cases in which there are desperate needs, that everybody has an obligation to fight. Even the one who sits in the Beis Medrash, they have an obligation to fight. What I have seen in answer to the second part of your question is there are rules of engagement that are defined both by halacha and by standard operating procedures of certain conventions within international law. Obviously, Israel follows those. We have lost soldiers. Or Torah Stone has lost students in the effort to follow those. So, for example, instead of dropping a bomb on a building, you go in there to make sure there are no civilians. And I say that in quote because when you find out that hostages were being kidnapped and captured and interred by civilians, those are no longer civilians, both following the Walzer protocols or halachic protocols. They're enemy combatants if they're participating in this war. And I have, we have students who, because they went into the buildings to check them for civilians, there were underground tunnels that were not completely dug on purpose, so that when soldiers would go in, they would finish digging it. It's, the ground in the Gaza is basically sand. It takes just a few minutes to finish digging it. And then they would pop out, surprise the soldiers, and they would injure the soldiers in a very significant way, or they would kill the soldiers. So I think the army is trying to balance its responsibilities, and I think our chayalim, for the most part, 99%, are so concerned with civilian life, even when not required by the army. They'll see a kid, and they'll run and grab him so he's not injured, when that kid was actually sent there so that he can become the target that the sharpshooter can aim for, because they know that the soldiers will come and try to save the kid. And then, Rahman al-Islam, one of our soldiers in their courageous act will lose their life because of the fact that this child is being used as a form of a weapon. And I think our soldiers struggle with their responsibilities, which brings us back to the first issue that I mentioned, and that is the mental health issues that we're all going to be struggling with. And as the war continues, or as things have settled down, as the summer, which is a different type of mode of your day, descends upon us, you will see that the mental health issues will become more and more significant, largely because of the issue you just brought up.
Shifting gears a little bit, as one who has been involved your whole life in Jewish education, obviously here in Israel, and of course many years in the States, What's the overall state of Jewish education in North America? Is there a shortage of trained educators? If so, how did this happen? And what needs to be done?
Again, these are great questions. I think that there is a shortage of educators, both principals, heads of schools, and teachers. If we can start with the top of the food train, so to say, first, um, you have, you know, 20 plus schools in North America that don't have heads of schools for next year, even though they're willing to pay 300,000, 400,000, 450,000, and the number just increases for a head of school. And part of that is that I don't think we've been paying those salaries for a long enough period of time, and therefore people didn't go into the profession. They preferred to be venture capitalists. There's nothing wrong with making money. Avraham was a rich Jew. There's nothing wrong with people making money if it's for purposeful things. But we talked about the tuition crisis, as Dr. Scott Goldberg said to me so accurately. We talked about the tuition crisis, but in the process of only talking about the tuition crisis, we forgot about making sure that we were paying both our heads of schools and principals, our mechanchim and mechanchot, our rabbeim and our morot, in a way in which they didn't have to be on Tomchei Shabbos. And what you're seeing is the fact that there is a gap or a hole in the educational food chain of people who didn't want to go into chinuch because they didn't want to have those struggles. They didn't want being in chinuch as a form of birth control, that they would only have X amount of children. There are other issues also, but part of the issue, there are other issues. If you are going to be the head of a school in a co-ed school and you decide that you don't want to send your kid to a co-ed school, are there consequences from your balabatim, from your lay colleagues, because you're not going to send your kid to the school that you're the head of. There are other issues, but let's just focus on some of them, and that is principals and heads of schools. There's a dearth. Part of that is that I think school leadership doesn't give them the support and respect they need, even though they're now getting paid properly. There's more to it than that. The expectations need to be reasonable when I think sometimes the demands are too high. And I think another part of the issue is a good thing, but we need to deal with it. And that is good people who would be serving in these positions are making aliyah. And therefore, that's to my benefit as somebody who has 32 institutions, that I am able to transition some of these people into the world of education in Israel, although it's not the same paradigms. But I think that there is a serious lack of educators and a serious lack of heads of schools. It shouldn't be that community teachers are worried about putting bread on their table, and we have to come up with some strategic ideas how to solve this problem in the next 3 to 5 years.
Are you seeing the same phenomenon in the rabbinical world in terms of rabbis and synagogues? Is it comparable to the world of education?
I think it's not always an easy position to be a rabbi. And I think there are less full-time rabbinic jobs even in North America. In Israel, full-time rabbinic jobs simply don't exist. You can count on your fingers how many full-time rabbinic jobs there are in Israel and have some fingers left. Um, but I don't yet see, and it could be, for 6 years I've been living here, I don't see that there is the same dearth of rabbis as there are in educators, and partially that could be because um, rabbis, you don't need to do it full time, so you could have another occupation. You could be a lawyer, you could be investments, you could be a rebbe in a school and be a rabbi. So I don't see the same dearth. I think there is that will come, but I think the bigger issue is the schools. And at the end of the day, the school is more important than the synagogue. You know, if you go to Boca Raton Synagogue, um, which has continued to be blessed with growth under my successor, who at one point was my assistant rabbi, and it's amazing to see his amazing work. Rabbi Goldberg, um, you'll see in the synagogue that they don't have pews. They only have like chairs you buy at Costco. And the reason for that was because at a certain point in the beginning of the development of the synagogue, when we built that whole campus from basically from a classroom to a full campus, the community came to the lay leaders came to me and said, listen, we don't have money for a youth wing as well as pews. So we're going to build the pews. I said, no, we're not. We're not going to build the pews. We're going to buy chairs from Costco and we're going to invest in a youth wing because the truth is the children are the most important structure. And I think that's true in any community. And I don't think I'm saying anything that not everyone agrees to. You can daven anywhere. And we learned that in COVID. But schools need to be palaces. And the most important jewel in the palace is our educators. And sometimes we don't give them the proper respect they deserve. We speak about the fact that there's a tuition crisis, and we don't. And sometimes that tuition crisis is solved on the backs of our educators. And therefore, the problem that you articulated is one that we're struggling with at the present time.
So what are some of the solutions? It sounds, Rabbi Brown, from what you're saying is, yes, it's a financial issue, but it goes way beyond a financial issue. It's a way of thinking, it's a motive, it's how we're approaching the whole issue, how we're valuing educators. What are some of the solutions?
Again, Ari, that's a great question. And I think we're not going to, it's a problem that didn't, get hatched overnight. It's a challenge. I think that part of the solution is that we need to bring the lay heads, the lay Kodesh, together and try to create expectations that are reasonable and try to create structures where the head of school, the principal has the support. So if he or she is a creative person, but not a strategic person, they're surrounded with somebody who's strategic. Or if the person is a strategic person, but not as friendly as you would like, we will surround him or her with somebody who fits that. It's not going to be one size fits all. People are spending a lot of money on education. They want palaces. And sometimes there can't be one conductor. Sometimes it has to be more than one conductor. Or there has to be a few people who are in charge of different sections of the orchestra so we can get the beautiful music we want to educate our children. I think there needs to be conversations. There's no competition between the lay leaders in Boca Raton and the lay leaders in Hollywood, Florida, and the lay leaders in Teaneck, New Jersey, and Arizona and California having a conversation together because they're all struggling with these issues and they can learn from each other. That's number one. And we can learn from the Haredi world where there's no such thing, where they make sure that their educators, are taken care of. So before the Chagim or anything else like that, there is a way with tzniut, with proper modesty to make sure the educators are being taken care of, assuming there's a financial issue to be concerned with. But I think about the expectation issue. It's simply about having a conversation. The second thing that I think we should start thinking about, and that is if you look, most principals of schools aren't there for very long periods of time. I don't remember the statistic, but if my memory serves me correctly, and it may not be, it was less than 5 years. So imagine if we have all of these amazing people making Aliyah, and they're at a point in their life where their children are no longer in elementary school or high school. They're sitting and learning in university, or they're in Yeshivat Hesder, or something of that nature. And we found ways for people who made Aliyah to come back to America. They are people who are familiar with the North American or the diaspora Gestalt culture, and let them come back for 3 to 5 years and do like a shlichut, not in the beginning of their career, but towards the end of their career. it's already happening that schools are hiring retired principals in their 70s and things of that nature. I'm saying, in your late 60s, you know, when you're making, I don't know what a principal makes in Israel, but nowhere near what they make in North America. So you go back for 3 to 5 years, and you fly back and forth, and you work out a proper package. I think schools would be very excited about that. It's not a 1 year, thing, but a 3 to 5 year position when you train someone else who will assume the responsibilities. I think that could be an amazing opportunity that I don't think we have yet explored.
Without discounting the importance of the value of obviously of every Jew and the hope that every Jew has a strong sense of Jewish identity, proud of the Jewish identity, identifies with the Jewish people and the future of the Jewish people. Given the continued unabated, alarming high rate of assimilation in North America, which does not seem to be stemmed at all, despite so many programs and so many efforts. Does it make sense to expend resources and funds in Jewish education in North America? Obviously, yes. We know the answer is yes, but should the emphasis rather be on promoting Aliyah, or is that just, this is not going to be the reality? We have millions of Jews in North America, and they have to be dealt with, properly, whatever that means. What's your take on all this? As one who spent lifetime in America, but made Aliyah and is now working, obviously living and doing great things here in Israel.
Thank you. Well, Yeshaya Leibovitz decades ago encouraged all American institutions never give money to Israel and to use all that money to be involved with education to stem the tide of assimilation. Maybe he was right. People didn't listen to him. Maybe he was right. Maybe he wasn't right. But the bottom line is that American Jewry, or for that matter, all of diaspora Jewry, has been supportive of Israel. I mean, just look, since October 7th, the Jewish Federations of North America, under the leadership of Julie Platt and Eric Fingerhut, and so many others who are part and parcel of that beautiful orchestra, Becky Caspi and others, they've raised $1 billion to help the state of Israel. That's an amazing amount of money raised in, I don't believe, more than 6 to 8 weeks. I think we have an obligation for a group of people who are willing to, not over years, to raise $1 billion. That shows that there's a pentala yid, there's a fire of a Jew, even the ones who aren't keeping Shabbos, who are intermarried, who are, maybe even celebrating Christmas. I think we need to create, I think that's part of the Zionist dream. It's clearly a halachic responsibility, Kol Yisrael Revim Zeh B'Zeh, among many other commandments that would fall under the responsibility of helping other Jews, returning a lost object, in this case being a soul, and simply, more importantly, simply letting other Jews know that we want to remember them, irrespective of what type of practice they'll have. So I think we must, do what we need to do. Or Torah Stone has 300 shlichim in Chutz La'aretz. We just graduated another whole group, so the number will probably grow to 320. And for every shliach that we send, there are more and more requests, which speak to the idea that people are thirsty. So I would suggest that we do multiple things. We can juggle multiple balls at the same time. For those who want to come to Israel, I don't think anyone should be forced. For anyone who wants to come to Israel, we need to make it possible. And there are plenty of amazing organizations that are doing amazing work. Nefesh B'Nefesh and others are doing amazing work. And we need to make it accessible. And as someone who recently made Aliyah, I can tell you it's easier to get a driver's license and a passport in Israel than it ever was to get one in America. And, people are kind to you when they know you're an Oleh Hadash, and it doesn't take long for them to realize you're an Oleh Hadash. So we have to make sure that Aliyah is on the table, but not everybody's going to make Aliyah. I think that despite the assimilation and despite the fact that, you know, the situation in diaspora might be significantly different in a quarter of a century from now, and the situation might be more depressing than it is now. I think that we as captains of the ship can't ignore, even if there's water coming into the ship, we still have to do whatever we can to bail it out, and we don't ignore our responsibility. So I think we need to, the same way diaspora Jewry, despite all of the issues that there were on October 6th, whether it was the egalitarian prayer space, whether it was the reforms of the court systems or laws, where everybody was at each other's throat on October 7th, everyone put those issues aside and everyone jumped in to make sure that Israel had the support it needs and are continuing to do that. We need to make sure that we are there to help every Jew who's looking for a Jewish identity, irrespective of what that identity is. We need to create educational paradigms. They're not going to be the same. I do believe that the future of the Jewish people is in Israel. I do believe that young people should come here. Universities here are amazing, And it might cost you $50,000 to go to a good university in America. Well, here you can go to the best university and it won't cost you more than, I don't know, $3,600 a year. So the bottom line is I would encourage young people to come here. We're at the, we're the startup nation with all the challenges. We're still moving ahead. Our economy, thank God, has not collapsed despite all the reasons why it should have. And I would encourage young people to come here. But be that as it may, and it's our responsibility to create those portals of entry. Be that as it may, if there are Jews in the diaspora, I think it's the leadership in the diaspora as well as the leadership in Israel's responsibility to do what we can, even though I think at the end, we won't totally stem the tide, but I think we will help individuals. And sometimes that's what's critically important.
Yeah. Rabbi Brander, thank you so much for today's discussion. It's been insightful and inspiring, and you should continue to go from chayil to chayil, from strength to strength, in all the activities here in
Thank you.
Israel and abroad in America and the rest of the diaspora. Thank you very much.
And thank you for what you're doing, allowing us to focus on important issues. It's greatly appreciated. And thank you for inspiring us. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.